He's the latest in a line. He's not a new phenomenon of a string of populists we've seen that have ridden these waves of frustration, anger, discontent, you name it, across the globe. And now it's come home to roost in Brazil, which is, the world's, fourth largest democracy, it's been called. A lot of people are questioning, how resilient is that democracy right now? Bolsonaro is a beneficiary of a lot of rage against the Workers' Party. Let's not forget the Workers' Party has held power for 13 of the last 15 years. The last years it was in power were Brazil was hit by an awful recession. Crime and corruption have been the dominant themes of this campaign, and the crime issue perhaps cannot be understated. There were about 64,000 murders in Brazil last year alone, about 175 murders a day in some of the biggest cities such as Rio. It's gone up in the past year or so. And there's really a sense that among a lot of Brazilians, something has to change. And that is exactly what Bolsonaro's run on, this sort of a destiny to change Brazil. The question is, are his proposals much too simplistic? And are we seeing right now another case of people reverting at a time of a lot of discontent, of a lot of chaos, a lot of disarray in their societies? Are they reverting from one extreme perhaps to another, and in this case another extreme of overly simplistic solutions to very deeply rooted problems which don't have easy answers?
Now, he's been dubbed the Trump of the tropics.
Right.
Do you think that's a fair comparison? Is it based more on his personality or his political agenda?
He's perhaps more unpredictable and erratic. He's perhaps more ideological than Donald Trump. Donald Trump, if anything, has often been unpredictable in his stances. But that said, he said, "I'm a Trump admirer." Those are his words. So he is an avowed, professed admirer of Donald Trump, and at least his perhaps his appeal, his populist appeal, and the way he's been able to tap into a base. We've seen echoes of that with Bolsonaro, but if anything, I think Bolsonaro is even harder edged in many ways. And the comparisons that's more often made with this man is someone like an al-Sisi in Egypt, Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, to a lesser extent perhaps even Erdogan's, Vladimir Putin's. This is a man who has tapped into a deep vein, a wellspring of anger, and he has also tapped into what is a backlash against the system, against the establishment, in this case that Workers' Party. And so, the Trump parallel, there's a parallel there, but I think he's, much more of an ideological, hard-edged populist / authoritarian in the vein of some of those other people that I mentioned.
And so if Bolsonaro becomes president-elect Bolsonaro after this vote, where is that going to leave the Workers' Party? I mean, they've dominated Brazilian politics, but they weren't able to run Lula, their first candidate, who's now in jail. So how are they going to look as an opposition party?
It's a fascinating question. Lula, if he had been able to run, as we know, he was barred from running, has been, looking on and watching this from his jail cell. He had been leading in the polls until he was barred from running. Haddad he gained some momentum, but never anywhere near what he would have needed if these trends continue to beat Bolsonaro. The opposition is going to have a giant uphill battle. It doesn't mean the Workers' Party is completely out. They still have quite a bit of representation, up to a fifth or more, depending on who they're able to align with. They've gotten some late support in this campaign from a lot of the centrist candidates, a very popular former Supreme Court justice. They do have a solid minority of society that is behind them right now. The question is how that would shape up as an opposition force in parliament. The Brazilian parliament is very fragmented, and part of that fragmentation is the reason right now, perhaps, that we're in the straits we're in. Bolsonaro himself changed party about 10 times. So he's a newcomer, perhaps, in many ways to this extremely firebrand version of politics that he's been espousing, that so many Brazilians have been rallying after. Workers' Party has its work cut out. It's coming off a very, very difficult stint in power, marked by corruption, graft, and crime, and a recession, I might add. So, it's not going to be easy for them, even in opposition.